What's up, champs? Welcome to another episode of the Short Shifts Fantasy Hockey Podcast, brought to you by Keeping Karlsson. I'm your host, Louis Ezekiel. Joining me tonight, my pal and yours, Shams Benamor. Shams, how are you doing on this fine Tuesday evening? A busy night in the world of hockey. Lots of action, a lot of goals being scored. I know that you are kind of in my position here this week, but what's new?
Oh, yeah, it's we're coming out of the holidays and coming close to the All-Star break. I think my players are just going to wait until the All-Star break to get back in, because that's how they're showing on the score sheet for me.
Yeah, that's a tough one. I have had two razor thin losses the last couple weeks, and this week I'm just buried under an avalanche of games. So we've got a 2-week match coming up here, so I think I will be cautious and use my remaining moves to help prepare for that. Sometimes it can be nice to kind of just know how things are going to end up beforehand, so that instead of chasing and maybe making some moves that are sacrifices, you can just sort of focus on moving on to the next one here. But yeah, it's just been tough. I had my opponent last week said they thought I had the best draft in the division, but it is not playing out in the scoreboard right now. So just need a little bit of luck here. Some puck luck on the other side of break. Hopefully it'll be a good reset. But I don't think everybody tuned in to listen to me moan and groan. So let's move on. We've got so much to talk about. We are going to cover some headlines featuring Carter Hart and Corey Perry. Plenty of injuries, including just team injury updates for the Wings, the Kraken, the Jets, and Columbus. We'll get into some individual players and then some hot streaks. Too many hot streaks to cover this week. We don't have time for any depressing cold streaks. It's all going to be hot as we move forward. So let's jump into it. The big headline here is that Carter Hart is on indefinite leave from the Flyers. You would imagine, at the very least, thinking in fantasy hockey terms, not those human terms. Obviously, we wish Hart the best, but that's got to mean we've got a boost here for Samuel Ersson for the foreseeable future.
Oh yeah, for sure. So he's just kind of been the belle of the ball, but no one really wanted to commit to him, Ersson, in fantasy, just because Hart was always looming over. But now with hopefully, we don't know what it's going to be for Hart, so we don't know a time frame. It's kind of the same idea with Kushkin or Girard. We'll just kind of have to wait and see. But he has the net to himself, and at least for this week, there's no back-to-backs. So the idea will be is that while they called up Pettersson for to be the backup, I don't see why they would play him. They'll just run with Ersson the whole time around. But you're going to have to worry about, Philly has been good, better than what we expected, but there's going to be times where they still run into the buzzsaw of the good teams like we saw today when they just got smashed, at least from a goal scored perspective from Tampa. They made a little bit of a comeback, but that score sheet doesn't look so good for Ersson. So there's going to be some bumps, but he has the skill and he's going to have the starts. It's going to be all him going forward, at least in the near term.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think that is a no-brainer in terms of, volume, which obviously has a lot of value. And yeah, sometimes you play Tampa Bay and you give up 5 goals. It's just kind of going to happen with the amount of skill that they can put out there, especially in their top 6, the depth not what it once was. Speaking of depth players, we can jump over to Edmonton, where the Oilers have signed Corey Perry, late of the Chicago Blackhawks, now over on the Oilers, looking to kind of round out that bottom 6 depth, provide the veteran presence, I suppose. Aim is to play Saturday. Any interest in Corey Perry here? I feel like with Edmonton, you've got Warren Fogle, who's been hot. I think that's kind of the interesting name. Not so enthused maybe about what Corey Perry has to offer, but maybe you've got a different take.
Yeah, I think it's at this point is that their top power play is set. That I don't see anything really coming to play. I think it's going to be a depth piece now. Something to keep an eye on is if they start to falter, they're on a long win streak and they're playing against the Blue Jackets, so probably going to keep that streak going. If they start to falter and then they go back to the blender, keep an eye and maybe Perry pops up in a good position. But if he's just going to live on the top or bottom 6, I don't see anything much other than, maybe a stray assist or goal because it seems like anybody on the Oilers is scoring right now.
Yeah, yep, I think so. And especially now that it seems, at least for the time being, that Evander Kane has sort of reclaimed that second line spot where McLeod had been. That sort of was maybe the spot that was up in the air. And if they weren't going to keep him down on the third line, I think that means Perry is likely to be there. But like you said, could be interesting if things need to change, if they need to shake up a little bit, could definitely see something else take place. All right, let's jump into some of our injuries and outries. While we do have some team-based injuries to talk about, I want to start with an individual. I'm going to toss this one to you, but Andrei Svechnikov taking an injury. Our guy, a bit of a Band-Aid boy here these days. What do you think the results might be with Svechnikov on the shelf here for a little while?
Yeah, this is one of those situations where everyone is disadvantaged. Usually we'll talk about a situation where if a player goes out, it's like, oh, this person's going to take the power play or all these things are going to happen. But you quickly saw, if you saw how Carolina was going off for that like week or so, and then Aho turned into like bona fide superstar and the whole power play was clicking. That was the moment that Svechnikov came back and he was fully healthy. Well, sadly, he's injured again, but luckily, like, it seems like it's a weird dance between like day to day, but like a little bit longer. I'm not sure. It was kind of broached as a good news is that it's a new injury and not a re-aggravation. So maybe it's just something, a nick or a bruise. And the best part of it all is hopefully he'll be back for the All-Star break. So even if he's not back, he'll have that All-Star break to rest and then he'll be full back into his motion. Because the way I look at it is that with Svechnikov injured, it's almost like you have like an injured Aho, because I feel like you could see night and day from like an Aho or any other of the top line kind of offensive players for Carolina. It's just a completely different team if Svechnikov is there and not.
Yeah, Toivo Teravainen is not going to be pulling the weight for that top line while Svechnikov is out, I'm afraid, or at least it hasn't seemed to be that way in these recent games. So, yeah, I think that's a good call. Those two are such a pair. But as you said, a little bit of positivity, the idea that, okay, we're going to be into the All-Star break. So all of these injuries that we talk about, hopefully these are some players who will be able to hang in there and get some rest and recovery during that break time. All right, let's head into some of our team-based injuries. Our mutual team that we are fans of, the Detroit Red Wings, a whole host of them to talk about. First, we'll start with Patrik Kane. Coach Derek Lalonde said that Kane might skate this week and get in on a practice. That would be great. They'll kind of see where he's at with his lower body injury. They could potentially get him back before the All-Star break, but if not, it sounds like pretty quickly after. The Red Wings are a team that can't really afford to take their sweet time and let him rest to get back. I think they want to get him back as quick as they can. Fell 5-4 to the Dallas Stars here today, Tuesday night. So, they if they want to have a shot at the playoffs, they want to get their best players back in there just as quickly as they can. Just incidentally, and I know this is an aside, but we had talked about Wyatt Johnston last week, and he had a good game, and then he had kind of a rough game, and then now, he's just sort of been going every other with multi-point games now that he has been on that top line in place of Joe Pavelski. So it's been Hintz, Robertson, and Johnston. So the games that have been on, a goal and an assist, nothing. A goal and an assist, nothing. Now 3 assists. I would stick with him. I think when he's in that spot, he can really capitalize. I know he's not getting that power play one time, but since we opened the door to talk about it a little bit with the with that Wings game, I just wanted to bring him up as a really interesting option who is still out there in some of these Yahoo leagues. He has 77% available. I know there's some dead leagues out there, but that's a guy I would be running to go out and grab before too long. Maybe not as much as Adam Henrique, who we're going to talk about in a minute, but maybe just behind him in terms of how much he can bring you in the near future. I'm sorry, I'm getting us all distracted. Let's go ahead and get on to the next team. We'll head out to Seattle. Home of our good friend Jeremy Versillo. Shams, tell us a little bit about what's going on with the Kraken.
So, big thing is that right now is that Dunn is considered day-to-day and might be back for this next game. Beniers is also day-to-day, but the news is at least at the very least it's not like as likely to come back for the next game. And the next is that Grubauer has been activated off of IR. So, and Drieger's been sent down to make the space on the roster. So it'll be interesting to see is that Joey Daccord has been going well, or much more than well.
That's
a lot of times.
Of an understatement.
Yeah. Caught myself there, much more than okay. So the idea will be is just kind of like the way I look at it is like with Lyon, with Husso potentially coming back in post-injury or post-All-Star, is that right now these guys have the net. As long as they keep playing well, they have it. But I think the rope is a little bit shorter now for Daccord because while we are a fan of Drieger and he had his time in the past, is that he wasn't really seen as an everyday person. So if Daccord hits a rough patch, that might be a hit for Grubauer to come back in. But as long as he's playing well or has maybe one off night, I think it's still his net.
Yeah, I think we sort of saw something like that happen with Martin Jones for playing for Toronto, in that he had that string of good play, but then Samsonov was coming back and he came in and played all right, and we had a couple kind of crummy games in a row from Jones here. Some of it from some very disinterested seeming Leafs play, and the fact that, the Canucks were just scoring at will, it seemed like. But, I guess my way of thinking here is that these guys have a little bit of a, their starting position is under threat a little bit more than it was before. It's only going to take a couple of hiccups before you find yourselves in a 50-50 or 1A, 1B, or even number 1 and number 2 situation. So, no matter how much you may have fallen in love with Daccord, in the meantime, if he kind of becomes a 50-50 or less, I think you got to be willing and ready to kind of cut bait and move on. Yeah, even though they've maybe have served you quite admirably. Let's jump in on the Winnipeg Jets next for the next team we're focusing on here. Coach Rick Bowness said Mark Scheifele remains day-to-day despite being out of that non-contact jersey. A little bit worrisome because we had mentioned that there was some hope that he would be back and playing on Saturday, and obviously that never materialized. Gabe Vilardi also reportedly was moving a bit better today, but they're going to see how he feels tomorrow before deciding whether to put him in. As always, check out Game Day Lines to see if you can find some updates on how and when and if those folks will make it back in. And then you could just have, I think we could have had a whole season series on our next team of injuries. Let's talk a little bit about Columbus. Shams, what is on the horizon for the Jackets?
Is Zach Werenski is, quote, very close to return. Probably not tomorrow, but I believe that was yesterday. So probably potentially ready for Calgary. So, I'll be honest, is that Werenski has been injured so much I kind of forgot about him in general, but nice to see him come back. So depending on your league with maybe a shower in general or a situation where a person had too many injuries and had to drop him even though that they have IR slots. So maybe fish around to see if, depending on your league, that he might be around, because when he is on the team and healthy, he is that power play one guy. He'll give you the blocks and he'll give you the assist on the power play. So something to keep in mind. And then something as well is that Patrik Laine is close, isn't as close to returning, but could be back by the end of the road trip. So just an idea right now with just kind of Jenner coming back, Werenski and Laine coming close, is that, this might be a situation where you start having to think about them actually having an offensive threat again and not thinking about, I have my goalie against the Blues. That's going to be a one goal or shutout situation. So just something to keep an eye on. They're getting closer to actually being somewhat close to healthy.
Yeah, we might want to change our conventional wisdom a little bit with regards to how we think about the Jackets. One of their players has made the hot list, so we will circle back to this team and talk about that hot streak and whether Werenski's return might throw a bit of a wrench into things. We're gonna take a quick break here to hear from some of our sponsors. We'll be back in a flash. You're listening to Short Shifts. Welcome back to Short Shifts. Shams, we got some good news on a couple of teams that are getting an injured goalie back. I'll let you take your pick. Do you want to talk about Hill's return for Vegas, or do you want to talk about Markstrom making his return for Calgary?
I'll open up with Markstrom. He's actually already has started. I believe he hasn't let in a goal yet. Hopefully I haven't jinxed him by saying that, but just kind of a thing to keep in mind is I forget exactly what the injury was. It was just kind of something random, and it ended up being hurt. But the nice thing is that it was at the start of the season. There may have been some question on his play, but when he's been playing well, and he's been playing often. We talk a lot about those goalies where we haven't seen a day in, day out starter, and it's playing well. Markstrom's that person, and if someone's maybe scared about him going in or out, I would be considering maybe trying to trade him. I actually got him off the waiver wire in a league just because someone was fed up with him early, and then I put all my fab, and he's just been my best goalie, even though I drafted some other ones, in the middle of the draft. So it's just kind of something to keep in mind. He's quietly been playing well, and he's back. So if you have him, be happy. And if you don't, maybe poke around to see if you can.
Yeah, I think he was a bit of an afterthought this season after how, horrendously he played last year. Remember, people drafted him last year on the strength of him leading the league in shutouts. So, yeah, it definitely was a disappointment in that regard. But, yeah, it's been coming back and playing nice. The Flames have not been kind of the disaster they appeared they might be towards the start of the year, and certainly during portions of last year. So, yeah, nice. Good for them. Even Jonathan Huberdeau has not been immune from a little bit of an uptick, so that's been nice to see. All right, so Adin Hill has made his triumphant return for the Vegas Golden Knights. I can say triumphant here because the game has finalized. The Knights were more than willing to let folks take shots at him. But of the 43 shots he faced, he only allowed 2 goals. He had a .953 save percentage, saved 2.13 goals, saved above average, and got himself a quality start in his return. Do you think this immediately puts things back into a 50-50 split with Logan Thompson? Do you think that potentially we even see Hill, take the lead if they can with or if they can afford to have him sort of take that position? What are your thoughts on his return here?
Well, Logan Thompson's last game kind of opened the door. I forget exactly what it was, but the week prior, he did have Logan Thompson, was one of the top 3 stars with a stellar play. However, he ended up having not the greatest games. So this is kind of how we were talking about with the previous goalies, is that Hill had a great game. Last game, Logan Thomas hasn't been the greatest, but he did have a good time before. So I think this has at least opened up the door with the possibility of, I have a feeling as they would want a 50-50 split, but at the very least, is that it's not going to be like a hot hand Thompson going forward. I would not guess that with that last game, but it's one of those, flip a coin and guess with what Vegas wants to do with these goalies.
Sure. So they've played back-to-back now, and they had an overtime loss to New Jersey, 6-5, most recently for Thompson, and then obviously had the 3-2 win over the Islanders here today. So I do think that Vegas, is more likely to operate kind of like a 50-50 team just because that's sort of the way that they are designed more than maybe some other teams. But yeah, you could, you see another couple starts like this. You could see Adin Hill maybe move into a 1A or even a full on number 1 position if he starts getting 2/3 of the start. So definitely something to keep an eye on. Not super widely available, but worth taking a look at here. And then our last guy we had return, good news for Buffalo. They get Jeff Skinner back. back into his regular spot on the top line with Thompson and Tuck. We would imagine, I assume, that we're more or less back to business as usual in Buffalo. If you had Skinner, you had him on IR. Great to have him back. Probably a nice little bump for Thompson and Tuck in the power play. But other than that, probably not a whole lot to report fantasy-wise, since you would imagine that Skinner is fairly widely owned. You would want to have a piece of that Buffalo top line if you have the opportunity. All right, and then I did have one guy who was kind of a hot streak ouchery combo. So I thought he would be a good bridge here between our injuries, oucheries, and getting into our hot streak section. So we've really got 4 hot streaks to talk about here, and I want to start with Martin Necas. Necas came back from injury last Friday. He's been very productive since, with 2 goals, 1 assist on 11 shots in those 2 games. Granted, Minnesota and Detroit aren't exactly defensive powerhouses, but his line with Nason and Drury got the top even strength minutes and a bit of power play 2 time as well against the Wild. Necas is rostered in 65% of Yahoo leagues, which means he's likely already gone if your league is active, but just might be worth a double check, see if he's hanging around in free agency, if you need depth scoring and center right wing eligibility. He's been having a nice little ride. Drury has been on hot streaks. Nason has been scoring nicely. As far as third lines go, you could do a lot worse than that group in Carolina. And again, they're getting big minutes, so maybe I'm giving them a misnomer calling them a third line here. It's more of a vibes based than it is a time on ice based approximation here. But yeah, that's been nice to see. Stepping up maybe a little bit with Svechnikov's absence, get some depth scoring is a good way to help out in that regard.
And one thing nice about Necas is that other than that little split before his injury, is he's shooting a lot. So as long as he keeps on shooting, obviously I would not expecting him to be, an everyday scorer, but those shots, depending on if your league takes that into consideration, that's going to be something to keep in mind with those, streaky wingers that he has or other players, is that, him shooting them on a hot streak, those points can come in at any point. So, Carolina likes to play all their lines. It's not going to be a situation where it's, just a random third line on, say the Wild, or actually, that's not going to see a lot of minutes where they're leading on their top guys. So I would look at them as maybe, a second line kind of time.
Yeah, that's a good point. You got to keep in mind, the team, and certainly, a group that is more willing to play their depth than maybe some of our other groups. Let's head on to another hot streak. I mentioned that we would be circling back to Columbus. And Adam Boqvist has had a nice little run with 5 assists in the last 6 games. Those are the 6 games since he's returned from injury. He's managed 3 of those assists on the power play. Not shooting much, kind of what we have come to expect from him, just 6 shots in those 6 games. But he is giving you a few of the blocks that you weren't seeing very much of last year. You mentioned that Werenski is on his way back soon. Right now, Boqvist has been splitting that top power play time with Damon Severson, although it's been kind of close in terms of the power play 1, power play 2 split. It'll be interesting because we want to watch game day lines. The Jackets, like I said, have been running 2 defense on that top power play, so it's possible that Boqvist could hang on and that it would be Severson who would be relegated down the lineup in some way. Boqvist has been used as a power play specialist before. Certainly we've seen plenty of opportunities where Werenski has been injured and someone has had to step up into that power play 1 role. So that would be something to keep an eye on, at least until another power play 1 forward gets healthy and they can go to 4 forwards, 1D. But yeah, that is one I would keep my eye on, especially if you need some defense scoring in the short term before a likely return from Werenski and maybe even a little bit beyond. This brings us to one of our hottest hot streakers. Shams, I'll let you take the lead here. Tell us what is going on with Adam Henrique, who has just been crushing it, even, with Killorn's injury, but even before Killorn was injured, he was doing pretty nicely.
Oh, yeah. Adam Henrique has been kind of a streaky player. I remember having him on my team, I think, late last season, because he was just on a hot streak of getting goals and assists. And right now, the nice thing is that maybe in the past he was doing it on the second or third line, just kind of hovered around, just, doing a focal impression where you're not sure where it's coming from, but you're going to ride it. But right now with the injury with Killorn is that he's playing top line and one of the power plays, they kind of split it. So you could say, power play 1.5, but either way, he's playing with their two best offensive players right now with Karlsson and Terry, who are both playing well on their own and has a lot of shots to go with it. So basically in the last 8 games, he has 18 shots, which has amounted to 4 goals and 5 assists. So the way I look at this is that obviously you're going to keep him while he's hot, but I'll give him a leash as well, as long as he's on that top line, because I was a person that was rostering Killorn in that spot, and he wasn't doing this well, and I was okay to keep him there. So with a Henrique who has the history of doing these kind of points and in a position to get them and showing that he can right now with all of this, that I'd be all over him if I had a chance in a league to get him.
Yeah, I agree. I think of everybody that we've talked to, I've got Henrique at the top of my list, maybe with Wyatt Johnston next, and then we'll get to some of these other hot streaks here in a minute, but certainly above Boqvist, as long as we're chatting about these guys. But yeah, one thing I really like about what we're seeing from Henrique is that it's been the last 4 games where he's gotten 6 of those 9 points. So it's really been sort of front loaded recently, and that makes me feel like we might be seeing what he can do with Killorn out. Those multi-point games keep coming. It's been very exciting. I don't know if it's East Coast bias or what, but he is owned as little as Wyatt Johnston and has been performing even more outstandingly. So yeah, I would say this is maybe not a pause the pod because we're close to the end, but I think if I had him available, I would run out and grab him just as soon as I could. He could have been a league winner for a lot of people on Sunday with his 2 goals. So solid opportunity. Let's talk about our last guy here on a hot streak, Simon Nemec. He's been kind of more of a periffs guy, but with a chance to get hot for a while. Nemec has benefited from New Jersey playing some real track meet style games lately, with a lot of high scoring from both sides. But he's managed to get 4 assists in the last 4 games, along with some nice block numbers, about 2 per game. And that's excising a nice 6 block game, prior to this run of points. He's been getting about a shot and a hit per game as well. So if you are in need of some depth D scoring and most of the good options have been pulled out already, you could certainly do worse than Nemec, who's gotten some power play 2 time as well. And you would imagine the Devils are interested to see what they have with this young blue liner. So another guy potentially to keep an eye on. Not as exciting, I think, as some of our other options here, but still a guy that I think, widely available and worth a second look if you are, we're going through this list and you're saying, he's taken to my league. Nemec may be a guy who is still available for you. So like to see that hot streak, like to see those periffs coming through as well, especially if you're in a categories league. That's always nice to see.
Yeah, and one thing to add is that we could have put this in the injury spot, but the GM was talking today at a press conference and he brought up Dougie Hamilton. So if you're worried about him coming back, they still say he's long-term, and they're going to have a better understanding of his timeline in 2 to 3 weeks. It's not that he's coming back in 2 to 3 weeks. They're going to have to wait 2 to 3 weeks just to have an understanding of what his timeline is. So right now it's just him, Nemec against Luke Hughes. So it's going to be a while before Hamilton's even into that picture. So don't worry about Hamilton crashing the party here.
Yeah, at least not quite yet. You've got a little bit of a buffer zone here to keep you safe in the meantime. Well, thanks so much, everyone, for joining us. Thank you, of course, Shams, for taking time out of your Tuesday to sit and chat with me. Really appreciate it. Be sure to give us a follow at Short Shifts KK. You can find Brian and Elon at Keeping Carlson. Be sure to use GameDayTweets.com to find all the best info from Twitter, including team by team and searchable tweets by player name. You can visit that site and the other great sites where we research our episodes at Yahoo, Frozen Tools, and Natural Stat Trick. Our intro and outro music was created by Pat Roach, and until we see you next time, play smart and keep your shifts short.